Hi everyone, my name is Luke and welcome to my channel. Today I'm going to be making a mono processing tutorial using Pixinsight to hopefully show you how I'll be processing most of my mono images through the coming season. As I've had no clear skies at all here lately, I've instead dug out some of my old data from back in 2019. This was data taken with a QHY 183 mono and a Skywatcher Evo Star 72ED, and that's what we'll be processing today. I'll provide these files, which I'm about to open in a moment, in a link in the description box down below so that you can follow along using the very same data that I'm going to be practicing on if you'd like to do the same. I'm not going to be using any special scripts today, just things that come pre-installed with Pixinsight. So with that said, let's get the files open and make a start. So you can see there's 3 files here: Hydrogen Alpha 28 10-minute shots, Oxygen 3 14 10-minute shots, and Sulfur 2 13 10-minute shots. I'm going to open all 3 at once, tile the windows, make them easily analyzable, and get them all roughly to the same size. And the first thing I'm going to want to do is apply an STF to each one of these images, just so we can see exactly what it is that we're working with. So there we go. Now that's done, as to be expected, the hydrogen channel looks to be the cleanest by quite a large margin. And you can see already some stacking artifacts around the top of, let's say, the sulfur image. It's quite obvious in, and it's not just the top, it's also the sides. So I'm going to go right ahead and use that as a dynamic crop window. Now it's worth noting that any of these tools that I'm using down the side, you can find all of them using processors and all processors. If you don't know where to look in any of these submenus, you'll always find these things here, and all the scripts can be found inside the scripts drop down. With that said anyway, let's use this dynamic view and we'll crop out all of those stacking artifacts. I'm going to be a little bit gung-ho here because it's just for a tutorial and a little bit of practice, as I've just recently got a mono camera. But yeah, you can be as careful with this as you'd like to be. Now before I go ahead and apply this, I actually want to drag a new instance of this over to the other 2 images first. That'll immediately crop those other images to the exact same dimensions that I'm about to apply to this one. So now when we go to recombine these images later on, they're all going to match and line up perfectly and throw up no errors. So the next thing I'm going to do is I'm actually going to stretch these 3 images and make them non-linear. Now this might seem like things are out of sync at this point, as this isn't usually the way that you do things. But if you just bear with me for a while, we'll see just how good the dynamic background extraction tool is at removing all of these gradients, which are going to be added together in the final image. And we'll only have to use it a couple of times rather than for each individual image. So I'm going to go ahead now and use this STF stretch that we've just gotten and drop down to the histogram window for each image. So I've selected Sulfur 2. I'm going to drag the STF window to the histogram window and the histogram window to the actual image. It looks like it's going to white it out, but that's just because it's still being stretched by the STF. Now we can do the same for the other 2 images. And finally for the hydrogen. Alright, so they're all stretched now. Now the next thing to do is actually combine these images and make an RGB image. I'm going to use the LRGB combination tool because I find that using hydrogen in the place of a luminance channel generally gives you a much smoother end image. So to that end, I'm going to rename these images really quickly with simple identifiers such as H for the hydrogen channel, S for sulfur, and O for oxygen. Now the channel combination we're going to do is going to be H, S, H, O. So it's going to be the standard SHO of a Hubble palette image, but adding in the hydrogen as a luminous channel. I will go ahead and apply chrominance noise reduction and just hit apply global on that. Okay, the combination is now finished and you can see we're left with quite a green overall image with lots of purple stars, and We're going to sort out all these problems one at a time. So the first thing to do is, I think, start tackling this gradient. So as I said, I'm going to try using dynamic background extraction for this. That's a DBE. The target image correction, as always, is going to be a subtraction, and I'm going to get rid of the background model in this case. Now I'm going to place quite a lot of samples around. As you can probably see, I'm going to be focusing on areas where the vignette pattern, at least, is at its absolute worst, to give the program lots and lots of samples to compute a model from. So these might seem like they're a little bit randomly placed, and that's because they are. My main aim is just to get lots of samples down without selecting the brighter parts of the nebula. You don't really need to worry about this too much, just make sure you get plenty of samples and it'll work well, I've found. Alright, so I'm just about done smattering this image with lots and lots of sample points. I think that'll do for a single pass. We'll try this now. Now I'd say that's an immediate improvement, but it's still not done yet. So I'm going to close this dynamic background extraction session, open a new one with this as the target window, apply that same target image correction, discard the background model, and just go one more time. Okay, I'd say that's about done. This might look like a real slipshod way of applying DBE, but I think it's going to get the job done, and so if it works, it's not good, surely. We'll soon find out. And I'd say that's mostly actually done the job and flattened out the image quite well. There's still a little bit of residual pattern down here, so I'm probably going to close this fresh image and just make a few more samples, especially focusing around this corner. See if that makes the next attempt any better. A little. I think it's more than good enough to work with anyway. So in that case, I'm going to go ahead and close DBE now. You could, if you wanted, if you had more time, do another round of this, because as you can see, it's gone actually better than last time, which was also an improvement on the base image. So I'm going to go ahead and close the base image, close this first iteration of DBE, and get rid of these mono channels too, because I've no need of them now. I don't really need the visual clutter. Alright, so we're left with this image that's in a 0 state of color calibration and these ugly kind of magenta stars. So let's start dealing with the rest of the problems. Now we've got most of the background gradient gone. So we're going to open Process, Color Calibration, and start with a background neutralization. Now I realize this really isn't the way to use this tool, but it does work quite well. Normally you'd draw using Alt-N and make a small background preview and point the tool to that. However, honestly, I'm too lazy to bother doing that most of the time, so for the sake of this, let's just keep things as simple as possible. I'm sure you'll agree in the end that it does end up with a nice result. So the next thing I want to do is apply a color calibration. The same thing. Just drag and drop it on the main image. And now I think I'm going to do an SCNR, but I actually want to leave some of these kind of strange ethereal looking greens, so it's not going to be an aggressive one. See, if I applied SCNR at this intensity, it'd remove all of those greens and we'd have that kind of standard Hubble palette look, which is no bad thing, but I'm wanting it to appear slightly different than that. So I'm probably going to drag this, I'm going to drag this down to around about 30% strength, and we'll try it at that. Okay, so that's definitely weakened that green a step while preserving a fair bit of it in the image, which I actually quite like. Now the next thing, these purple stars are really standing out. So there's a script for that pre-installed in Pixinsight. So you can find this by going to Scripts, Utilities, and Correct Magenta Stars. Just going to apply and execute. And as you can see, it's sorted that problem out rather nicely. So the next thing I'd actually like to run on this image before making any adjustments, say with histogram or curves, which is going to bloat these stars quite a lot if I leave them in place, I'm going to actually remove them and keep them separately to one side to be added back in later on in processing. So to that end, we're going to open StarNet, create a star mask, and using all default settings, just drag and drop that on this window and wait a short while. Okay, so the process has now finished. Let's take a little bit of a look at how it worked. It's gotten rid of most of the stars. There's still some remnants of the center asterism in the middle of the rosette there, but I'm happy with that for the sake of this. You could probably tweak the result you're going to get from StarNet by de-stretching this image ever so slightly, just by opening the histogram tool, effectively selecting it, and if you like, dragging the midpoint across. If you see there on the preview window, that'd have that effect, which would also drop down the intensity of the stars, and StarNet usually works quite well on stars that aren't burned out like those middle ones are, and that could have made it work a little bit better. But that's just an extra tip for another time, but I'm happy to process this as is now, so I'm going to go ahead and call this what it is. That's my stars. Do the same thing to this, change the identifier to starless. I like to use simple identifiers because I'm easily confused. And let's start processing this now. So I'm going to use curves tool to begin with. I'm going to select the window, open a preview, and I think it needs an initial stretch just on all the channels. So I'm going to bring up this midpoint, drag down near the black point to make that kind of gentle S bend that grants you a lot of contrast. Just cycle back and forth a few times, make sure I'm happy with the change that I've just made. And I am, it's definitely improvement. And go ahead and apply that. I'll reset the tool and make one more pass at stretching it, I think. Perhaps ever so slightly less intense this time. I think about there looks quite good. And again, this background is going kind of an odd grey colour, so I'm going to drag down the bottom edge of this slider into, as you can see, just a very gentle S, and that's going to have that effect of granting it all this lovely contrast, which makes things really pop and stand out. Now that's done, I'm going to apply on that, and I think I can start to work on the individual channels now. So the major colour in this image, I think you'd agree, would be kind of a greenish tone. So to that end, I'm going to select the green part, and I'm going to drop down the midpoint of that. So you can see that's going to make the other colours actually start to stand out more. Back at the centre, everything's green, and if I just drag it down, the other colours start to really pop out now. I'm getting these beautiful golds appearing in the hydrogen regions, and the core of the nebula is going to awesome deep blue, just starting to look fantastic. It's a little bit dark, but we're going to work on that too. Now before I go ahead and apply this, hopefully you can see that the background has actually ended up going ever so slightly kind of a purple magenta color again. We can hopefully prevent most of that by dragging up the black point of the histogram at this point. You'll have to excuse me if I keep pausing mid-sentence. I've got quite a sore throat today, but I still wanted to actually get something recorded and done. Yep, I'm satisfied that that's been an improvement. So I'm going to go ahead and hit apply on that. The next thing I want to do is apply a little bit of saturation so I can see in more detail the colours that I'm actually working with. That's really starting to stand out now and look very attractive, at least to my eye. Yeah, that's certainly an improvement, so I'm going to go ahead and hit apply on that. Okay, so I think some more of this green could stand to be removed, but not much. Maybe just a little step downwards. Yeah, around about there. And again, just a little movement up on the shadows tones in the green. It's really easy to overcook this, and you can see you could go that way or you could go this way, and just a movement of a few millimeters on the mouse would basically ruin your image at this point. So it's best to just take your time, be careful, and spend more time looking at the image, the part of the image you're working on, rather than what you're doing with the actual histogram. Just keep your mouse button held down and let your eyes do the rest of the work, really. So to me, that looks fairly well balanced. Yeah, I like that. I'm going to hit apply. So I'm going to want to adjust the reds now, I think, around these regions here that were kind of a beautiful gold before. They've gone almost a bit of a yellowish color now. So I'm going to actually add some more reds into that. So I'll push up the red midpoint, drag down the red shadows because it's had the effect of also boosting the reds in the shadow regions, unless I do this, as you can hopefully see. I'd say that's reasonable again. Yeah, just these regions now have just been nicely boosted. I like that. I'm going to go ahead and apply. And I think largely at that, the next thing I want to do is another boost to the whole set of channels at once. So I'm going to drag up the midpoint, down the shadows, not too far this time, because this is getting on towards being a final stretch movement for me, and I don't like images where they're kind of crushed to black, or indeed where they're way too light, because it just doesn't seem like an accurate representation of what the background of space would be like. Not that this is an accurate representation either, but that's a different point entirely. I think that's an improvement. I'm going to hit apply. And again, I think an important point to make is that this is all just personal taste. There's no right or wrong way to process these images. Indeed, it's just your choice how you actually like seeing things. Many people are probably not going to like the green in this, but I happen to think it really fits this target well and looks quite attractive. I'm going to remove a tiny bit more of it, but not before I've nuked some of this purple stars again. That's just kind of remnants left over from a semi-successful StarNet++. So I'm going to go to Utilities, use that same tool again, correct magenta stars. Let's get rid of those. I'm going to apply a very weak SCNR again, maybe a 30% one. And yeah, I'd say that's a definite improvement. If I just undo and redo, you can see it's taken, especially in these regions, to a kind of an obvious step between the colors, and it's just smoothed that out by removing some of that green intensity. Now, I think at this point, I can go ahead and apply the stars back in. But before I do that, I just want to accentuate this core part of the nebula a little bit more. And there's a script pre-installed in Pixinsight that we're going to use for just that job. It should do all this nice region, this kind of like Leaping Panther section. And it's just script, utilities again, and dark structure enhance. I'm going to use all defaults and just hit OK. Alright, that's finished. Hopefully you can see that it's raised the contrast on that section if I just undo and redo the script a moment. It's quite an obvious effect, but really rather nice one to my eye at least. Especially around this region here. It's just made it pop out all that more, and I really like that look on these. They're not really natural looking images when you take SHO images like this, but it just makes them stand out so much and really catch the eye, and I think that's what I find appealing on these narrowband images. So I'm going to go ahead now and apply the stars back in, and we'll see where we're at. So we're going to use Pixel Math, open the destination window and create a new image. This is important because if we don't like the end result, we can actually manipulate the stars in a moment with morphology and try again. But if we did this without, then it unfortunately consume the other image. Now, if I just do starless plus stars and hit apply. It's going to make a new image for us now. That's the result of those two combined, which I like, but I'm going to say straight away I think the stars are dominating the image a little bit and taking away from the real main point of this image, which is all about that nebula. So to that end, now I'm going to try out process, morphology and morphological transformation. I'm going to make sure I've got the stars image selected and maybe about a 50% amount. It's quite a strong tool is this, but you'll notice in a moment when I apply this, it's going to look like someone's turned the lights out on these stars. So hopefully you just saw that there. If I just undo and redo, stars really take a hit in brightness and size, which is, it looks wrong on this preview window, but if I just go ahead now and apply again, I think that's a definite improvement over the previous image. So if I just move these starless and the stars versions off to one side, and we can tile these two, window and tile. So yeah, the version with smaller stars on the left there, I happen to think is the one I prefer. You may prefer the other. It's as I said before, it's all down to personal taste. Now, I hope that this has been useful to some of you, and I haven't just bored you all half to death listening to this for a while. Thank you very much indeed for your patience. I hope you enjoyed. I'll be coming out with much more of this type of content in the future. It's just getting around to recording it all, really. I've got so many things I want to get done. Just finding time to do them all is the main issue in my life right now. So just keep your eyes out for more if you enjoyed this sort of thing. I'd like to say a very special thank you to everybody who's joined my channel members. You guys are fantastic, and I really do appreciate your support. Now, with that said, I look forward to seeing you all next time, and until then, clear skies.